Dear Canadians, I'm profoundly disappointed by the proposed new assisted dying legislation. It was Kate Carter's agonizing, but not terminal, illness that led to the Supreme Court ruling that withholding assisted dying from people with unbearable illnesses was cruel and unconstitutional. The Liberal government was tasked to draft a bill that would protect Canadians from this kind of cruel and unusual punishment caused by disease. However, Bill C-14 is so restrictive that not even Kate Carter herself would have qualified. Bill C-14 does not uphold the spirit of compassion that informed the Supreme Court's decision. It contradicts the wishes of 85% of Canadians. It shocks me that by not allowing advance consent, Bill C-14 condemns people with horrible diseases like dementia, ALS, and Huntington's disease to die cruel, lingering deaths. The very outcome that the Supreme Court, in its wise decision, had sought to prevent. Just over a year ago, my dad, already suffered from severe aphasia due to a stroke, developed a stomach flu, which caused him to be confined to a bed for several weeks. This resulted in the development of diabetes sores on his arms and legs. His doctor said his limbs would have to be amputated. His quality of life was so compromised that he felt he had no choice but to starve and dehydrate himself to death. This took 16 excruciating days and nights. During this time, he was fully conscious, afraid, and in pain. Watching him go through that process was like watching 16 days of torture. Under Bill C-14, my dad would not have been eligible for assisted dying because of the cognitive impairment he had suffered from a stroke. How can it be that the very thing that the Supreme Court said was unconstitutional, that is, forcing Canadians to lose all dignity as they die horrible, protracted, agonizing deaths, is proposed to be left in place as the law of the land? This is not just a bitter disappointment to me. It is a cruel, heartless proposal that would continue to condemn disease victims to yet more fear and pain. In 2013, my mom also began to suffer vascular dementia as a result of a series of strokes. Had the option been available, she would have wanted to make an advance directive because her neurologist had told her that more strokes and progressive dementia was inevitable. Alzheimer's complicated matters even further. At Christmas 2015, a second stroke occurred and she was rendered unresponsive. My mom had created a living will. It said that if her strokes were to render her severely mentally and physically handicapped, she would want food and hydration to be withdrawn. At the advice of my mom's neurologist, my brothers and I complied with her living will. Watching my mother become corpse-like over 6 days and then linger on in excruciating discomfort for another 10 was heart-wrenching to watch. She showed clear signs of distress throughout. She cried out. Tears streamed down her face. She often moaned and grimaced. She frequently tensed all the muscles in her body gruesomely because the dehydration process provoked extreme muscle spasms. Nonetheless, despite my mother's anguish, I felt as though she'd made the right choice when I looked around at the other suffering patients and their families in the stroke ward. 20 years ago, my grandmother too starved and dehydrated herself to death after 9 months of colon cancer, from which she was already in excruciating pain. Again, the starvation and dehydration was like piling torture on top of torture. She was fully conscious, scared, and in pain, but it took 12 terrible days for her to pass. For my mom, my dad, and grandma, the existing law demanded that they endure complete loss of dignity, pain, fear, and utter misery. Watching them suffer exposed my brothers and I to a different, though also grievous kind of suffering. It was my hope that Bill C-14 would protect other Canadians from going through this kind of legal cruelty. I find it very troubling that Bill C-14 stipulates that death must be in the reasonably foreseeable future. The Supreme Court deemed it cruel to condemn anyone to a life of severe and intolerable suffering, period. I never want to stand helplessly by the bed of a loved one again and feel the way I felt about my mom, dad, or grandma. Canadians need to fight for a less restrictive bill, one that allows all desperately ill Canadians access to assistance in dying and the right to make advance directives. It is the only way to treat ourselves and those we love with compassion and dignity. Please, if you agree with me, I really need your help now. Policymakers are making decisions about amendments to this bill right now. Dying with Dignity has made it easy to tell important decision makers how you feel by providing you with several easy options at the link below. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen about my mom, dad, and grandma.